Ever wonder how Ariel's underwater world in The Little Mermaid is the result of hundreds of hours of seamless collaboration between a global team of artists? Eleyna is taking us behind the scenes of it all.
Welcome to She Talks Business. In this episode, we have Eleyna Haroun, a VFX Line Producer at Framestore, one of the leading visual effects companies in the world. Having started her journey in documentary filmmaking, Eleyna went from working on Pakistan's first Netflix original to animation and visual effects for high-profile projects like The Little Mermaid.
The day I started, they were just like, oh, by the way, you're working on The Little Mermaid. And it's a tough project. Every scale on her tail has been worked. Every strand of hair has been, artistically placed. Yeah. The best thing I ever did was learn how to manage myself before I help manage other people.
How do you think the advent of AI and emerging technologies is affecting especially your field? Hi Eleyna, it's really, really nice to have you. I was talking to a friend yesterday saying that I'm doing this, and I was like, yeah, I'm speaking to someone who worked on The Little Mermaid and VFX, and she was like, what is VFX?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a good question. I should definitely ensure that we're clarifying that today.
So it's basically visual effects, but I think it just really is work and manipulation of images. That's essentially what it is. And I think when you're talking about VFX, it can go from something as a cosmetic fix on a character. It can go to as big as, blasts in film, fire, simulation of water in a shot as well. It's amazing how big the scope is getting. And I think consumers and audiences just really, they want more action. And I think a lot of the things that were practically done, now it's just kind of a bit easier to do it in VFX. I was actually watching this really funny video about James Bond and how one of the films, there was a scene that he shot live where he had to jump on crocodiles. And I was just thinking, oh, those poor crocs, why do they have to suffer for this man? And I was like, now we could do that in VFX. And I was like, this is why you need VFX, because A, it's dangerous. B, I don't think any animal should have to suffer for the craft. And I think you can now just do things in film that maybe would have taken a lot more money, a lot more time to do on set in real time, and now you can just do it with more control in a studio.
Yeah.
And there's quite a, there's a lot of pushback. I think a lot of people, I don't think people quite realize what they're watching sometimes and how much VFX there is in things. So I do hear a lot of people say, oh, I really miss the days when, film was just film. But these are the same people that go for Marvel movies where most action scenes, you'll see the body is actually digital. It's like a 3D digidouble and the face is tracked onto the character.
Yeah.
So it just helps with a lot of action scenes now. And I think our appetite for sci-fi and for fantasy is really taken off in the past couple of years.
You say you're a VFX line producer, and that sounds like a very full statement. So I'm very keen to understand, and I'm sure people watching are, what exactly does that mean and what does that entail?
So I think when you talk about VFX, a lot of people aren't quite sure what that means. And when you talk about in the old days with traditional filmmaking, there was a lot of practical effects. And now that we've gone into digital media, there's now the manipulation of digital content or shots and things like that. So VFX is basically the manipulation of digital content media. And being a line producer is very logistical. So you're basically handling a lot of schedule, a lot of budgets. And the bigger the film, you're literally changing and updating that schedule every day. You're coordinating between artists. And I think when we talk about production team as well, there's just so many layers to it. You have executive producers, VFX producers, and you're just the line producers, that person on the ground, working with the artists, working with coordinators, making sure everything is delivered on time, targets are scheduled. So it's a very managerial role. You're also constantly feeding back information. Will you hit a target? Will you have enough crew? Do you need more crew? And then you have producers and associate producers who are constantly then taking that information and putting it against a budget and then giving that back to client, or they're more forward facing with the client. at least at Framestore, it's more, line producers are more in-house and they work. You do end up being in director reviews and client calls and things like that. But yeah, that's pretty much what the day-to-day for a VFX line producer is. But again, I think film is such a different beast that you kind of change a little bit what you're expected to do, like project to project. So it's not as fixed, but yes, that's essentially what line producer is.
So what would you say in terms of that is good advice for someone who can manage this entire kind of, and nobody can do it perfectly. I understand that. But
the thing is,
what's helped you anyway?
It's really weird with production because there's some days where I'm just like, am I good at my job? Because I think you're dealing, it's one of those things where you have to deal with so much information and things are constantly changing and there's constant feedback. And, your project really changes based on at least it changes based on your directors, the style in which they give feedback. It changes based on their VFX supervisor because, how it works is you basically have one studio, maybe like, Disney or Universal, and now they're outsourcing certain scenes to, third-party vendors. And that would be like, so like Framestore, Double Negative, MPC, these big VFX houses are basically churning out these Hollywood films every year and they work on particular scenes.
Yeah.
And I think you're just dealing with a lot of different components of feedback and you have your own internal feedback process and then you have the external client feedback process. So I think you just have to get so organized with how you manage things in production. And I think, honestly, lists, if you like lists, I think production is for you.
That's an interesting one.
I don't like, I still think your morning routine really makes or breaks your day. And I really love working at a big studio because I get up every morning and there's always that one person on the team who's kind of better than me. And I kind of love that because it just makes me get up and want to be better. Or I see how they work. They'll get up in the morning, they'll have their coffee. They've made their lists. They've made their lists for the day.
The lists are key.
The lists are made at before 9 a.m. And I'm like, I'm amazed by how organized and how on top of things people are because there's so much information and things are constantly changing. And things within your own internal workflow constantly need fixing. One department flags like, oh, the environment in this shot is not working. It needs to go back for a fix. Or this is lighting, need to go back and re-render this. There's an intersection between the character and something else on the set. And you don't really see these things until, maybe you've rendered out and it's gone to another. Usually internally they try to flag it, but sometimes it does happen that it gets towards compositing, which is the end, and then they flag it. So you're constantly trying to make sure things are delivered on time, feeding back. So you just got to get super organized. And I think you just have to be super proactive because you have to constantly talk to people, check up, chase things. I think there's a style in which to do it in production because you have to chase things, but you're also part of a team. You have to be supportive, and sometimes if an artist is struggling with a shot, what resources can you give that artist to help them take out the shot? Because obviously, artists are at different levels. You have juniors, mids, seniors. I think that's a big part of it. And then also people just have lives. People, like, someone has to take their dog to the vet. Someone has childcare. I think that's really the big part of Framestore that appeals to me is that they're really supportive of people being individuals outside the office.
Yeah.
So if someone has to live their life and do things, they'll support them. They'll be like, sure. And there'll be someone else who will be your buddy and help you out, or you'll reassign things, it's only close to delivery where you'd probably say, do you need to go unless it's a major emergency? But otherwise, I think that's really key, is just being a team player and just being able to work independently and in a team. That's the key, yeah.
And it's so funny. I've been listening to you speak this whole time, and you've spoken in like the almost film terminology the whole time. You know what you're saying, and it's your whole. This is your world, right? Basically. And I know you told us that you started doing this at the tender age of 19 when you were back in Pakistan. So can you just walk us through how you fell into this kind of a very unconventional, like you said, job, and what kind of drives you to keep staying on there?
So I had a bit of an unconventional start to my VFX career. I started in documentary originally. So at 19, I just applied for an internship, got a call back, and it was at Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy's film studio, and she's a 2-time Oscar winner. At the time, she had just, I believe, gotten nominated for her first Oscar. So I worked there, and then I went to university, came back, worked for her again, and then essentially my journey into animation, I moved into 3D animation while working there. And it's because with documentary in Pakistan, a lot of the times we're dealing with a lot of, I would say, sensitive topics. So we had a project about minority rights, and some characters maybe weren't so comfortable showing their face on screen, especially as a minority. And we had one film about a karate Hazara girl. And a Hazara community is I would say that I wanted to bring the most out of the project. So I basically did that through animation. And I think we also wanted to make documentaries for kids because there wasn't a market for children's content in Pakistan at the time. So essentially that's kind of how I got into animation. So I would take the sound bites, edit it, and then we would use 2D visuals over that, and kids loved it. And it was also, we would do outreach, and it's quite a conservative country at points. So a lot of community leaders were not okay because we were talking about stuff like child abuse. We were talking about minority rights, women's rights. And I think it's interesting because when people see real life people talking about these things, they would not allow the content to go through. But with animation, there was a level of dissociation. So they were allowing the content to go through. So that's kind of how I got into animation.
Nice. And from that girl that decided to learn everything on set to being part of the Little Mermaid crew, which is huge. Tell us about that. Like, how did that come along, and just the whole process?
That was a bit insane because I had just moved to London, and I was basically working freelance for an LA-based studio that was still 3D animation, and I had always been interested in VFX, but I've never trained in VFX. So I was like, and I don't have formal training in animation. It's everything I've learned while working in the industry. So I applied to this company called Framestore. And obviously, I think with VFX companies, I think the thing that intimidated me was, I think it becomes a bit of Chinese whispers because when you're international, you always hear, oh, this studio is good, this studio is bad. And I think VFX didn't have quite a good reputation for how they, at the time, it was known to be quite a fast turnaround culture, and it is still quite a fast turnaround culture because you're basically at the tail end of the film production. It is post in a lot of ways, and so you have very tight deadlines, and because it's digital, you can constantly get notes and feedback, whereas when you're going on set, you shoot, and then that's the footage. And you can do reshoots, but you really have to get what you need in that limited time. With VFX, you can literally be working on a shot the day before it releases, the film releases. So I was a bit intimidated, but I knew Imka, this VFX, she's now running a company, but at the time she was mentoring, and she was specifically mentoring women and from like developing countries as well. And she had just raved on about Framestore, and I had heard such good things about their working culture. So when I went there, the day I started, they were just like, oh, by the way, you're working on The Little Mermaid, and it's a tough project. And The Little Mermaid, just to give you an idea, all the scenes underwater, most of that is digital assets. So everything, I mean, I really enjoyed it because, I'm from Karachi originally. Like, we grew up by the beach. So I was so interested in the project, like visually, the aquatic life, everything. But I was so intimidated. And they also use different tools in the West than they do in developing countries, because in studios in Asia, they tend to use in-house tools. But for tracking, scheduling, things like that. In Framestore, they tend to use Shotgun, and I didn't have a lot of experience with Shotgun, which is basically like tracking, scheduling, all those things. So that was a bit intimidating for me, because suddenly I was using these new tools, and it was the requirements were fast deliveries, you had to be on point. But Framestore is just, honestly, it's such a lovely place to work, and everyone is so supportive, and they're quite nurturing in the sense that they understand if you're new that you need someone to like hold your hand for a little bit and help you. And I think I got so much help from all the other line producers. And at that time I joined as a coordinator. So I basically was like, okay, I'm going to take a step back to take a step forward. And that was a great experience. I think that's kind of what settled me into Framestore, really.
Nice. And what is the kind of one thing from the Little Mermaid? Because we've all watched it.
Yeah.
Like, what is the one thing behind the scenes that we don't know that you'd be like, oh, this is like a fact that you wouldn't know watching it?
Her hair in all the underwater shots is actually CG.
Oh.
And I didn't realize how much Ariel's character was actually impacted by her hair. Because, when you watch the 2D animation as a kid, like, you're always just like, oh my God, her hair is amazing.
Yeah.
But there's constant movement and flow to the hair because she's underwater.
Yeah.
And so and the thing is, if you shoot someone underwater,
That's naturally going
which
to happen.
weirdly, a lot of people on the internet was like, oh, why did they not shoot it underwater? You don't look nice when you're being shot underwater. Like, your hair comes in your face. There's a certain level of haze. It's not easy to shoot underwater. And so the actress basically had it was kind of like a crane that was like attached to her waist. And she basically was mocking the movement of swimming.
Okay.
And then her hair was basically done by, there are multiple companies working on these kinds of films. So Framestore had like quite a few scenes, like Part of Your World, which is the big one, and so, I was coordinating CFX, which is basically simulating her hair and things like that. And her tail as well. And it was amazing. I mean, it was, it really made me appreciate, I think, 2D animation a lot more as well, like the original film.
Yeah.
Because all these small nuances you don't really think about until you start working on it.
Yeah. And how long did it take you guys to how long does it typically take? And it might not be with this film.
I actually came onto the film, I think, towards the tail end. And I worked on the film for like a year.
Oh, wow.
I'm pretty sure they were working on that film for a good while. I'm not sure the exact time because I wasn't at the studio at the time. But I mean, honestly, if you look at that film, like, that film is an ode to VFX, in my opinion. Like, some of those scenes, they are just absolutely a labor of love. Every scale on her tail has been worked. Every strand of hair has been, artistically placed.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that actually amazed me going into VFX, because obviously with 3D animation, you don't see that side, but you actually realize how much directors have come to appreciate and rely on VFX.
Yeah.
Because it just means that when you're on set, there's a lot of like, maybe a wire that's showing or something. And, you can get that cleaned up with the, in post and things like that.
Yeah.
And even, makeup slips or, is the lipstick on the character's lips kind of faded off. So I think it just gives directors this kind of ease now that, it can be fixed later in VFX.
Yeah. How do you think like the advent of, let's say, I don't know, AI and more kind of emerging technologies is affecting especially your field, both in creation from your end and also consumption from the end of the people actually watching it?
Well, I think technology with film it is a field that essentially uses technology, right? Because maybe, I mean, many years ago you had people using practical cameras with, film. Now that's gone out. You only have a couple of places that actually process film. So the craft constantly evolves with technology, and I love that about film. Like, I don't think I really understood the scope of it until I had come here. And we, at Framestore, we did a film called Flight, and it was a 3D short animated film. And I essentially went up to my department manager and I said, I want in on this project. And they were basically using AI as part of the workflow. So I think there's a couple of keywords here. There's Unreal Engine now. Flight, the short film, also incorporated that technology and motion capture and things like that. But then additionally, it also was using AI as part of its pipeline process to automate certain things. And I think that was a very cool experience because it was we were actually testing the technology and feeding back as well.
Yeah.
What worked, what didn't work, what was more efficient. And I think a lot of people are using AI, but for film, it's quite infantile. So that was a really exciting point because it was like you were working on this tech as it was emerging. And I think that's really the beauty of working at some studios here, that you're working on certain technology that you need a lot of resourcing for, and a lot of skilled labor as well that's very specifically specialized. So I think AI is going to really take off in the next couple of years in the film industry. I think there's a lot of things that can be automated. And I think in production, I'm really excited about it because I feel like it makes, your job is to make things efficient. Your job is to make the workflow as effective and efficient as possible. If you can take a manual task, automate it, it just means that you're saving time, you're saving budget, all these things, and studios will appreciate it. So I think I'm very pro it with ethic. In as long as it stays ethically used, I'm very pro it.
Nice. And I mean, what do you think is your next kind of move? Do you think you'd like to stay in the West and kind of do films like this, or do you think you'd go back to Pakistan and kind of take this learning and enhance it there, or do you not know, which is also absolutely fine?
Well, I think there's two things. I think obviously I would love to go up the ladder at Framestore and train more, work more. You get to associate producer, you get to VFX producer. I think those are executive. I think that is really where the trajectory is going. I also partner and consult for another company on the weekends called MindKicks. And MindKicks works with Web3 and creating content for Web3.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a really interesting big conversation in the future because it's basically about using technology it's a decentralized space and it's giving more power, I think, to consumers and users.
Yeah.
And I think it's also incentivizing how we consume digital content now in the future.
Yeah.
Because there's so many apps coming out
that
if I got a crypto token or an NFT, or if I basically got a token or crypto for every time I scroll on Instagram, I'd be great.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So I
think we all would be. A lot of us would be anyway.
So I think it's really incentivizing users to feel like they're getting something back from consuming content. Because I think the conversation really becomes people are like, oh, watching movies is it your productive use of your time? Downtime is productive. Entertainment is productive.
Yeah.
It generates creative ideas. But I think now going in the future, even with consuming like the content we use for brands and things like that, I think Web3 is going to be a big part of that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely think for the gaming industry, Web3 is going to have quite a big impact.
Yeah.
For e-learning as well, I think it's going to be quite huge. And I think at least MindKicks in Pakistan are doing such an amazing job just trying to push that to the forefront. And I think when we talk about developing markets versus developed markets, with film, developed markets tend to have an edge because they have the resources and their consumption, their revenue is actually generated for films mostly in countries like India and China because they have the highest population density. Karachi, my city, has 18 million people in it. So I think now the conversation is shifting. A lot of parts of the film process are also being outsourced to India.
Yeah.
I think it's really now about working with developing markets for production.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about that. Like, I'm really excited about, you know, technologies making developing countries more included in the
Process.
content creation process.
Yeah, that's really cool. And just pivoting a little bit, you've been working in this field for a long time. What do you think is your kind of advice for someone who wants to be a VFX producer?
Well, I think the thing is, when you're talking about VFX producer, my advice is you have to start. I would really start from, if not like a production assistant, then start from production coordinator. Because I feel like even with me, because I was producing in Pakistan and then being a coordinator, you really see things on the ground. I really think you need to earn your stripes because you're handling such big budgets, and you need to be, as a producer, you need to kind of create and help sustain the flow for a project. And you're constantly strategizing. You know, you're strategizing how to work with the client, you're strategizing how to get the best out of your project, how to utilize your resources. So I would really say the more experience you have, and at least film is a kind of field where education, you know, I get this question a lot because a lot of people were like, oh, do I need to go to university? Do I need to do a formal schooling? Yes, there are certain benefits to that, but I think film is about the years you do and the experience you gain. The more projects you work, the more diverse your experience is, the better you're going to be as a filmmaker. I would also say you just have to get so comfortable with criticism and feedback. You cannot be in a creative field, personally, I think, if you can't handle criticism, because that is your biggest inhibitor for your own growth as an artist and, you know, as a filmmaker.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice. And I think when you're saying that, you know, it's really, you spoke about how it's managing a lot of different people. You get criticism. There's schedules. There's loads of different things happening all at once. So it feels like there's a lot of managerial kind of component to the job.
Yeah.
And did you realize when that was it a point that you were like, yeah, I feel like I know my stuff? Because people have like this imposter syndrome constantly, right, at work. But you said like earlier, I don't know if I'm good at my job some days, but you clearly know your stuff. So did you realize when that actually changed for you, where you were like, I'm really comfortable in this world?
You know, I think because I didn't start off with the typical VFX trajectory, and I was very much geared towards I was very much geared towards documentary.
Yeah.
I think that switch, and most of my, I would say, bigger credentials initially were in documentary.
Yeah.
So like I worked on a documentary about bomb disposal units in like the north of Pakistan and things like that, and taking those experiences and then working on like VFX and the Little Mermaid, it just seemed really like one extreme to the other. I think it's part of the creative process. At least for me, I do feel like I do suffer maybe from imposter syndrome most days.
Yeah.
But then I think the point is, it's just, you just have to love what you're doing.
Yeah.
I really don't sit and think, am I the best at what I do? Is that important? I'm just like, my aim is in my job and as a filmmaker every day is, what can I do to make an impact?
Yeah.
And I think if you start your day off by asking that question, like, what can I do to make an impact, and how can I look after myself while trying to do that? Because when I started my career off, I did exactly what I thought I needed to do to succeed, which was not, I mean, how do I say this in a better way? I burnt myself out big time when I started out my career. I was working every day, long hours, Monday to Sunday, and I was cramming in my schedule. I didn't have the energy to think creatively because I was constantly burnt out.
Yeah.
My idea of socializing at the time was spending the night at my friend's house and falling asleep mid-conversation. And I think giving yourself that space to think, to be creative.
Yeah.
Because even with production, there is a certain level of activity involved because you have to strategize. You have to work on schedules, think where can I readjust resources to get things out in time.
Yeah.
If you're not healthy, if you're not working out, having a good diet, making time for yourself, if you're not happy, you're not gonna be good at your work.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing I ever did was learn how to manage myself before I help manage other people.
Yeah.
And that is in any field. Actually, to get advice for my career initially, one of my friends is a football coach.
Oh, cool.
So I said, can you give me advice on team management?
Yeah.
And so he was talking, and I don't watch football, by the way, but he's just like, okay, if you have this personality, adjust it here. If you have this kind of personality, adjust it here. This is how you work. This is how you bring the best out in your team. That was great advice.
Yeah.
That actually helped me through my career.
Thank you so much. This was really, really helpful. I think we all got an insight into the world of a VFX producer. And it's not every day you get to have that chat. So thank you so much. It was really, really nice talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much.
If you found this episode interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.